Pakistan has long balanced its ties between the United States and China, but as geopolitical tensions between these two superpowers escalate, that balancing act is becoming more precarious. With Washington pulling back and Beijing deepening its economic footprint, Islamabad finds itself at an intersection. Can Pakistan maintain its delicate tightrope walk, or will it be forced to choose a side? I'm Ali Janayanar, and this is the Newsmakers. For decades, Pakistan has carefully managed its relationship with both China and the United States, benefiting from strategic and economic ties with both. But as the tensions between the U.S. and China harden into a geopolitical standoff, Islamabad is facing increasing pressure. Just last week, Pakistan's President Asif Ali Zardari spent 5 days in Beijing, reaffirming Pakistan's status as a key Chinese ally. Meanwhile, the U.S. has scaled back its engagement with Pakistan since its withdrawal from Afghanistan. But does that mean Washington is willing to cede influence to Beijing? And how does Pakistan navigate the risks of being caught in between these two competing superpowers? Claire Harriott reports from Islamabad.
Pomp and ceremony in Beijing for the arrival of the Pakistani president. Asif Ali Zardari's 5-day visit to the Chinese capital underscored Pakistan's commitment to its largest northern neighbour.
We are first allies of China, then allies of anybody else, because you and us are on the border.
China and Pakistan are ironclad friends and all-weather strategic cooperative partners.
The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, is a $62 billion mega project that's built infrastructure like the Lahore Metro, a port in the town of Gwadar in the southern Balochistan province, and in the same town, a Chinese-built airport received its first flight a few weeks ago. Their cooperation reached new heights in January when China launched a Pakistani satellite. But a string of attacks in Pakistan against Chinese workers prompted a rebuke from Beijing and a demand for tougher security for its citizens. CPEC development projects have become a target for separatist groups in Balochistan province, and in August, at least 73 people were killed in Quetta, the provincial capital. No group admitted involvement after gunmen targeted traffic in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in November. Violence has plagued this region, which borders Afghanistan, for decades, much of it attributed to the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, also known as the Pakistani Taliban, or TTP. An ally for Pakistan in its fight against terrorism is the United States. Tensions between Washington and Beijing have escalated sharply.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
China responded in kind, slapping tariffs on American goods.
The measures taken by China are necessary to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
If Beijing demands public support from its all-weather friend, Islamabad will have decisions to make.
The way that Pakistan has always framed how to pick that side is, well, we see that China was willing to encourage investment within Pakistan, support diplomatically as well, whereas with the US, because that relationship has always been about doing more on terrorism, about Afghanistan or AFPAC rather than just Pakistan in of itself. We have to find a way to revive that transactional relationship with the US, but at the same time maintain that all-weather friendship that we have with China.
Since withdrawing from Afghanistan in 2021, the US has been less invested in the region, and some analysts argue Pakistan is less important to the US as a result. Pakistan's relationship with the United States dates back to its founding in 1947 and the end of British rule. It's a relationship often described as transactional. And if there's one global leader whose foreign policy approach is transactional, it's Donald Trump. So while there may be a complex diplomatic path ahead for Pakistan, there are opportunities too. Claire Harriott, Tier 2 World, Islamabad.
Joining me now to debate that and more from Beijing, China, commentator and host of radio CGTN, Zhao Ying. From Islamabad, the executive director for the Center of Research and Security Studies, Imtiaz Gul. Good to have you. And from Virginia, former Chief of Staff to U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell and retired U.S. Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. Welcome to all of you. Imtiaz, let's begin the conversation with you. I mean, Pakistan has long been, has had to balance China as well as the United States. The question is, can it continue with this balancing act, or will the intensifying rivalry between these two superpowers force Islamabad to choose a side?
Well, thank you very much. First, I don't think there is much pressure or compulsion to steer to one side or drift to one side. I think until 2021, Pakistan had maintained an excellent balance in its relations with both China and the United States until the then Prime Minister Imran Khan started publicly saying that Pakistan's future was more tied to that of China. And perhaps this is what created the unease in Washington. And this was the year, 2021, October, when the CIA also went ahead with the creation of a China Mission Center. And the stated objective, as the then director explained, was to contain the expanding influence of China in the region. So until then it was, and at that moment, Pakistan's military then decided basically to take sides and steer the ship away a little from China. And this is what also created anger and unease in Beijing. But thereafter, I think right now, both countries are trying to re-engage primarily for two reasons. Pakistan is looking at China for business cooperation, financial support. China is looking at Pakistan in geopolitical terms, because Pakistan is to China what India is to the United States in the region. That's why I think the disengagement from China, from Pakistan, is no option for Pakistan, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Colonel Wilkerson, let me bring you into the conversation. Imtiaz Gul was talking about, okay, Pakistan is re-engaging with both sides, but when you look at history, especially during the Cold War era, Pakistan was a key ally to the United States, especially in sort of countering the expansion of Soviet influence. But has Washington sort of written off Pakistan as it sort of pivots to countering China?
I must say, thank you for having me on, but I must say I agree almost 100% with the person who just spoke. His comments are spot on as far as I'm concerned. I think Pakistan has some difficulty and some complexity in maintaining a balance in the relationships. And I would hasten to add that we really don't know yet what the present policy, the future policy, at least for the next 4 years, of the United States is going to be vis-a-vis China. Donald Trump is all over the map with regard to all matter of serious issues. So it's very difficult to pronounce. And I suspect right now the Pakistani mind is really on the fact that for the first time in almost 30 years, they finally got a champions tournament and India's not coming. That's probably got more Pakistanis focused than China-U.S. relationship.
Okay, well, we'll get to how India plays into this crucial relationship, but let's bring Zhao into the conversation. Imtiaz Gul had some comments. The colonel agrees with that. What's Beijing's stance? I mean, Pakistan's president just stated a couple of days ago that his country is first allies of China and then allies of anybody else. I mean, how does Beijing view this relationship? Is it a reflection of true loyalty, or is it strategic necessity?
Well, I mean, I would say, to be accurate, this relationship is defined as all-weather strategic cooperative partnership, which means the two countries will always maintain this good relationship despite no matter how the external environment, no matter how the geopolitical climate shifts. And, CPEC, of course, is a very important part of the Belt and Road Initiative. But of course, more importantly, I think both China and Pakistan are developing countries, and they have this common vision for a more equitable, world order, which I believe is something that naturally brings together countries of the global south. And when it comes to the US, I feel that the US strategy towards Pakistan has always been driven by Pakistan's role in America's regional policy, whether it is during the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan in the 80s or during the US war on terror in post 9/11. And now with the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, Pakistan no longer seems to be a priority. And we are hearing from this congressman saying that maybe the U.S. should terminating Pakistan's designation as non-NATO ally. So I mean, the money has never been unconditional. When U.S. feels that Pakistan no longer serves its strategic interests, the money will stop coming. But that being said, I still believe this relationship is important for both the U.S. and Pakistan. For one thing, the United States remains Pakistan's biggest importer. China is the second largest. So I think maybe Pakistan has a huge market, of course, and it has a huge population. 2/3 of its population are young people. And I know that some U.S. companies like Nestle and P&G, they have already been manufacturing products in Pakistan and selling them elsewhere. So I think maybe Pakistan can be more pragmatic in its dealings with the U.S., like focusing more on investment and trade instead of just viewing this through, security lens.
Okay. Imtiaz, I see that you're agreeing with what Zhao Ying had to say, but you actually, in your first answer, you were giving some references, first to the transition or the pivot made by Prime Minister Imran Khan back in 2021. This also sort of coincides with the U.S.'s absence or withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, do you feel that this presents a security challenge in terms of China unwilling or not being able to fill this vacuum that's been created there?
Well, I think China is not bothered about filling the vacuum. China, what we believe, what we have seen, wants to engage with every country in the region out of the spirit of cooperation and under the Belt and Road Initiative. So that's not a concern for China. China, the concern for it is the security in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I assume that Chinese are very pragmatic. They understand why they are facing these targeted security threats. They know this is a proxy war that primarily is targeting the Chinese interests in the region. And this is what connects and keeps Pakistan and China together. There have been some problems as far as the Chinese workers' security in Pakistan is concerned. But I think both are trying to brave that under continued consultation. But I think China remains very much interested in Pakistan as much as the United States remains invested and interested in India. It's about maintaining relationship. As our Chinese friend said, this is an sort of all-weather strategic relationship, which rules out disengagement, just because China, what we have seen under BRI is this push for economic connectivity rather than coercion under conditions to suit geopolitical wars. And we have to also understand, keep in mind, we don't know yet how President Donald Trump will spell out his policy on the region. And I think what he has said a couple of days ago, that he wants to reach out to President Xi Jinping and President Vladimir Putin and urging them to basically cut down their defense expenditures. So this will be a huge shift if all three can sit together and redefine their engagement in the region. That will be perhaps much more in favor of peace in the region rather than confrontation, as we have seen until very recently.
Okay, I mean, Colonel Wilkerson, I need to bring this up since it's come up twice, and that's the issue of India. Because the United States has sort of declared or views India as a strategic partner, how does that play into the U.S.'s engagement, its view on relations with Pakistan?
As far as India is concerned, I think we have to admit that India is going to maintain its own posture and its own policy. Sometimes it's going to seem closer to the United States, and other times it's going to seem closer to Russia, and perhaps even eventually to China. Here's something I think we all need to recognize. The world needs to recognize this. the power in the world in every component, cultural, intelligence, military, economic, financial, every component is inexorably shifting towards the east, as it once shifted 2,000 years ago, you could say, 350 years ago at least, towards the west. The inexorable movement of global power is shifting towards the east through Central Asia to the magnet, which is China. So everyone's going to have to accommodate this, including the American empire. Now, it's fighting it right now. One of the reasons it's in Ukraine, it's trying to bleed one of the people involved in this, Vladimir Putin. It's trying to do it in the Middle East, in Levant, through its attack dog there called Israel. But it's going to be unsuccessful in that. It's going to have to accommodate this multipolar world, as Xi Jinping and Putin and others call it. Wang Yi talks about it all the time. Wang Yi's a smart man. So is Sergei Lavrov, who talks about it. So this is a reality that the world has got to confront. Pakistan is sort of caught in the middle, and it's going to have to do a balancing act between the big power that's developing and the power that is diminishing.
So I'm wondering, I mean, because you say there was a sort of expected shift to the east, was alignment with Beijing sort of an expected outcome then?
I think so, but not too rapidly, because the empire's got a lot of time left, and it's going to be mean in its diminishment of power. I go back to a story I'll tell you about Pervez Musharraf meeting with Colin Powell in his office, and Powell was trying to talk him into just, friendly talk, divesting himself of one of his positions, either president or head of the military. And Musharraf essentially said, I can't do that because if I do the one, the other one will get me, and if I do the other one will get me. Well, that's kind of the way Pakistan is now. But it's going to inexorably probably have to follow this shift of power. I'm talking probably 100 years towards the east.
Okay. Zhao, let me bring you into this conversation. You mentioned CPEC. I mean, China has invested billions in this economic corridor, yet when you look at it, there are security concerns, and that is, or that could be, a major issue. How much of a liability do you think that Pakistan's internal instability is to China's long-term economic plans in the region?
Well, I mean, this is indeed a big challenge in China-Pakistan cooperation. Those separatist groups like the TTP and BLA, they are repeatedly targeting Chinese nationals and Chinese projects. I mean, the CPEC projects or the Gwadar port, for instance, and they have led to some delays in these projects. And some Chinese companies have already been requesting more security measures before proceeding with the investment. But that being said, I don't think this will fundamentally weaken this cooperation between China and Pakistan. And we know that they have been now working on a second phase or the upgraded version of CPEC. And this will be focusing more on green energy or agriculture or technology, and also will be better connected with Pakistan's 5E framework, namely energy, export, e-commerce, etc., and will better benefit the local communities. And I believe with these energy and infrastructure projects, they will pave the way for long-term economic growth of Pakistan, which will help reduce poverty, which is perhaps, I believe, one of the root causes of these extremist activities in the region.
Okay, Imtiaz Gul, what's your take? Yes, there are some hiccups in terms of security issues, but it's not enough to sort of derail the train.
Well, I don't think the train will be derailed. It's in mutual interest to keep it running. And I think regardless of how much both the interests of both China and Pakistan come under attack, as long as they can synergize their thoughts and actions, I think this expansion under the BRI, under CPEC, will continue regardless of what other countries may think about.
Okay. Colonel Wilkerson, let me ask you, I mean, we've been talking about the economic corridor, and in the general framework, you have the Belt and Road Initiative and the economic cooperation between Pakistan and China. Does the United States feel that it has perhaps missed an important opportunity, especially when it comes to perhaps providing an alternative for Pakistan's or an economic partnership with Pakistan?
The United States will operate always based on the crisis of the day, the crisis du jour. It operates basically out of its inbox. It has really very poor strategic conceptions most of the time, certainly poor grand strategic conceptions. And that's what you're talking about, is recognizing this power shift and going along with it. And what I see most dangerously right now for Pakistan is nothing that we've talked about. They've just put, as I understand it, about $1 billion towards this, U.S., and that's the climate crisis. They've already seen what it can do to them with the flooding they had, and it's just going to get worse. So this is something that challenges the globe, not just Pakistan, India, China, the United States, and elsewhere, the global South in particular. And this is something that is going to arrest all of our attention more and more as it comes along. And I would say that's probably the number one challenge, that and nuclear weapons.
Zhao, let me turn to you. The colonel was saying that there was a strategic misconception on the behalf of the United States. China, on the other hand, is approaching its relations with countries in the region with a much different approach. Let's bring in one of the topics that the colonel had mentioned, and that is a big challenge as he sees it in terms of the climate crisis. These countries, both Pakistan and China, have been suffering quite a bit as a result of this. Tell me how this can play a common denominator between the two.
Well, I mean, actually, when we talk about climate, I think this is actually an area that China and the U.S., despite their differences, they can cooperate. And Pakistan is actually one of the worst victims of climate change. So I think maybe Pakistan can act as a bridge between China and the U.S. on this issue. Although Donald Trump may not be that interested in this topic, but I mean, still, Pakistan can can play that bridge building role because it historically played this bridge building role, like back in the 1970s when the U.S. wanted to reach out to China, but there was no diplomatic channel, and Pakistan served as that secret channel. And then in 1971, Henry Kissinger secretly flew to Beijing to meet with Premier Zhou Enlai during a visit to Pakistan, and that paved the way for Nixon's visit to China the next year. So I think Pakistan can continue to play that bridge building role today. And actually, earlier this month, I think Pakistan organized this multilateral maritime exercise that brought together vessels of over 10 countries, including vessels from China and the U.S., along with that of Japan and Italy, I think. And I think Pakistan offered a very good platform for the navies of different countries to communicate, and of course, a platform for Chinese and U.S. military to communicate.
Okay. Imtiaz Gul, I want to sort of get your take in terms of what are some of the challenges moving forward and what the relationships with both sides are likely to look like in the next half decade.
I think it's the bigger challenge basically falls upon Pakistan's political and civilian leadership as to balance its relationship both with China and the United States, and also to set our own house in order. We played as a bridge between China and the United States. We remain inextricably linked with the interests of both countries because of being located in a position here. But I think Pakistani leadership will have to basically up its game when dealing with both China and the United States. And I think we are very well placed to play that role, but it would require a lot of vision, a lot of smartness as far as the Pakistani leadership is concerned. That's the biggest challenge, I would say.
Since we're talking about vision, Colonel Wilkerson, at the beginning of our conversation, you said, I'm not really sure how the next 4 years are going to pan out, but if you were to give a vision in terms of how Washington proceeds, how would that be?
Transactional. That is to say, if it's business and it's good business for both sides, but certainly for America, then it's going to happen. If it's not business, if it's not good business, certainly for America, it's not going to happen. That's the way I look at Donald Trump right now. That's the way I think everyone needs to look at him until he shows otherwise. particularly with the things he's doing that I think are very positive, like ending this stupid war in Ukraine and getting it behind us. He could do some real monumentally good things if he tries. I hope he does.
Okay. Colonel Wilkerson joining us from Virginia, from Beijing, Zhao Ying, and from Pakistan, we have Imtiaz Gul. Thank you very much for all joining us on this episode of the Newsmakers. You can follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Marijan Ayandar, and we'll see you next time here on the Newsmakers.